Guys, it's Robyn and welcome to my channel. So today on the Robyn's Nest, I have another really sweet baby shower cake planned for you guys, one with a bit of a rustic feel. Now, mom and dad like to farm and hunt, so they're really outdoorsy people. So in keeping with that theme, I thought we would make a birch tree, and it's also going to have a really sweet bucker dough theme. Hope you guys like this one. Now let's get into it. So while this is for a gender reveal shower, this is not going to be a gender reveal cake, unfortunately. But as you guys can see, I've baked up three 10-inch marble cake layers using a little bit of chocolate and vanilla, and we're just going to start by leveling these out before we stack and fill them. Now we're just going to grab our cake tops and remove them, and you can discard them, but I'm going to save them. My kids absolutely love cake scraps, but who doesn't, right? Alright, now it's time to start stacking and filling. So I'm using a 12-inch cake board because this is quite a large cake. This is a 10-inch cake. And I've also tripled up the cardboard, so I have a nice thick cake drum to work with that's going to hold up to the weight of this cake because it's probably going to be a hefty one. Alright, so now we're just going to take a little bit of buttercream and spread that onto our cake board and secure that first layer of cake into place. Now we're filling our layers, and using a piping bag, I'm going to alternate vanilla and chocolate all the way to the center, creating sort of a ringed effect, making it look more like a tree. And for any of you who might be curious and who are still looking for that perfect buttercream, you have to try my easy American buttercream. It is simple to whip up, super smooth for piping, and is overall really easy to use. So I highly recommend it, and I will leave a link to that video in the eye up above or the description box down below. So once you've finished alternating your buttercream colors and you've reached the center, you need to smooth out your buttercream. So I'm just using a small offset spatula, and I'm very gently giving this a good going over, making sure it's very smooth and we don't end up with any air bubbles in between those cake layers. And now after adding our next layer, we are once again going to alternate that buttercream all the way to the center and smoothing it out with our offset spatula again before finally adding that last layer of cake into place. Now once we finish stacking and filling the cake, I like to give it a good press down to seal it all together and push out any air bubbles that may have formed between the cake and the buttercream. Now for our final step in preparation for some fondant work, we need to add a nice thick coat of buttercream so we have a good base for our fondant to stick to. So we're going to take a piping bag and apply a nice generous layer all over the entire cake, and then first using my small offset spatula, I'm just going to give this a quick smoothing over, and then I'm going to switch over to my bench scraper and we're going to get this extra smooth and clean. Now, normally with a crumb coat, I don't usually worry too much about how it looks, and this cake doesn't matter too much either because it's a tree, but when you're typically working with fondant, lumps and bumps and imperfections can show through, so it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're going for that perfect fondant finish. Alright, now we're going to stick our freshly crumb coated cake into the fridge and allow that to firm up so when we add our fondant, we don't mess up our buttercream. But don't leave it too long or your cake will get too cold and your fondant will get sticky while you're trying to smooth it onto your cake. Okay, now it's time to prep our fondant for paneling our cake. So I'm using a 10-inch cake board as my template to cut out the top panel for the cake. And I'm cutting it out a little bit bigger than 10 inches because I want it to fit perfectly, and it's much easier to take a little bit away than add it on, obviously. So now that we have that cut out, it's time to get it into place. So now we're going to use a large rolling pin, and this is really helpful so you don't end up with any finger marks into your fondant. And we're just going to roll the fondant over it very gently and pick it up and then place it on top of the cake. Now, as you guys can see, there is a little bit of an overhang there, so we will have a little bit of trimming to do. So after we get this into place where we want it and give it a little smooth out to secure it, we're going to use an X-Acto knife to cut that excess fondant away from the outside of the cake. Now using our Dresden veining tool and a cake turntable, we're going to twist our cake and create lines all around the top of the cake to look like the tree's rings that show how old it is. And we're actually going to use both sides of our Dresden tool, so that gives us various degrees of depth, which is also going to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now using that same tool, we're going to make some cracks in our wood in the center and around the edges. And what that's going to do is make our log look like it's begun to dry and crack a little bit. Now we're going to add some color and bring this log to life and make it look real. So we're going to add some lemon yellow and some brown and mix that together. And then we're going to dilute that with lots of water because we want it to be fairly thin so it spreads easily. And now using a nice thick paintbrush, I'm generously painting this on because you want it to get down into all those nooks and crannies. Now I was taking a piece of paper towel and sort of wiping this off to lighten it up as I was going, but I found it to be wasteful and wanted to wait until I was finished painting. But I forgot to hit record on that part. However, you guys are gonna love it and you will see how cool it looks in just a minute. Okay, now that our top is finished, it's time to work on the sides of our cake. So I've rolled out a nice big panel of fondant, and this isn't long enough to go all the way around the cake. We're going to do that in 2 sections, but I've rolled it out so that it is tall enough to fit. Now I'm cutting the one side of the fondant, and this is going to be the side that sits flush with the bottom of the cake, and we're going to trim the top portion after we get it paneled on. So now we just have to get this picked up and attach it to the cake. And I'm just going to use my hands to gently smooth it and attach it as I go. And I do apologize, my camera is on autofocus and for some reason it doesn't like focusing on the white. Okay, now that we have our fondant into place, it's time to remove all the excess fondant. So I've taken my X-Acto knife and I'm carefully going all the way around the top, removing it and lifting it as I go. And now once I have that fully removed, we're going to take the sides of our fondant and we're gently going to tear that off, making it look like the birch bark has been ripping from the tree. Okay, now that we have our first panel into place, we're going to roll out our second panel to approximately the size that we need it. You're going to want it a little tiny bit bigger to make sure you have enough. And then we're going to carefully put that into place and then tear the edges like we did before to make it look like the birch bark is tearing. And now we're just going to finish it off by trimming off that excess fondant once again using our X-Acto knife before finally starting on some of the finer details on the birch bark. So using our Dresden veining tool once again, I'm just taking my tool and I'm joining the cracks at the top of the log and sort of dragging them down the sides at varying depths and lengths. And I'm also creating some at the bottom as well and around the middle. Now for the knots, I flip my tool over to use the softer side so that way I don't cut into the fondant too much. And we're just creating some indentations which we're going to later paint in nice and dark to make them look more like the knots on the tree. Alright, now that we have the simple line work done, it's time to get a little bit more invasive. We're going to create some more peeling birch bark. And to do that, we're going to use our X-Acto knife and we're going to cut on a very, very shallow angle, approximately 20 to 25 degrees maximum, because you want those little flaps to be super thin. And you're going to pull them out a little bit with the tip of your knife as you go. Alright, now once you've finished peeling all your fondant birch bark, it's time to add some color. So we're using some Wilton's brown color dust and a really soft paintbrush. And I'm just getting in underneath all those little flaps and in the lines and inside the knots to give them a nice soft shadow and to create a bit of depth. So you're just going to keep going around until you have it all colored and filled in and you're happy with how it looks. And then you're going to switch over to a darker brown edible paint and we're going to fill in all of those knots and deepen some of those cracks, and we're also going to create all of those little vertical lines that typically appear on birch bark. So I've actually gotten to make one of these cakes before. It was a 3-tiered wedding cake for the same couple, but I never got to make a video. It's only over on my Insta, the Robyn's Nest 83 if you want to check it out. But needless to say, I was ecstatic when I was asked to make a baby shower cake with the same theme almost exactly 1 year later, as I finally get to share it with you guys. So I really hope you're enjoying the video, and if you are, don't forget to leave it some love. So for the decorations, guys, I just used the same technique that I always use. I created a stencil and I have cut out the shapes that I need using my X-Acto knife, and you can find me doing it in pretty much any one of my videos, but I will have a proper tutorial for you guys soon, I promise. So for the front of the cake, I just made a very simple sign out of block letters that says Baby Read. And for the top, we made a really nice sign with a little bit of a more elaborate font that says Buck or Doe. And I've also created the little cutouts of the buck and the doe. So I wasn't sure how I felt about this design in pink and blue, so I swapped it out for teal, and I think it worked perfectly, and I hope you all think so too. If you did, you know what to do. Leave me a big thumbs up and leave me lots of love in the comment section too, and if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you receive a notification every time I post a new video. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.